Imagine a scene where you check your phone in a typical environment when suddenly everything freezes. The screen goes dark. Every car on the highway comes to a stop. The streetlights go out. And in just a few seconds, a nation that lives in the rhythm of instant gratification finds itself 150 years in the past. No warnings, no gradual shutdown, only silence. This is the reality of the electromagnetic pulse event. And this is what keeps me awake at night. Most people will not survive the first 90 days, but you will be different because you are learning what to do before it happens. My name is Zach. I've been preparing since 2012, and today I'll tell you what life looks like after an electromagnetic pulse and, more importantly, how you can actually survive. Let's figure this out. So, what exactly are we dealing with when we talk about an electromagnetic pulse? An electromagnetic pulse is a powerful burst of energy that destroys everything with circuits, wires, or electronic components. It can disrupt and permanently damage electrical components and entire systems in most critical infrastructure sectors. In our modern world, this is practically everything we depend on for survival. There are three main ways an electromagnetic pulse can occur, and you need to understand each as they require slightly different approaches. The first is a high-flying electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. This is the most terrifying scenario. A nuclear explosion at altitude can impact vast areas of the national power grid and other critical infrastructure systems. It is about a weapon exploded at an altitude of 25 to 400 kilometers above us. The terrifying part is that a well-aimed detonation could cover a large part of the continental United States. This is not intimidation, it's physics. The second threat is a coronal mass ejection from the sun. Imagine this as a solar flare sending plasma towards Earth. In 1859, an event known as the Carrington event struck our planet so hard that telegraph wires sparked and caught fire. Operators could send messages without even connecting their batteries. This happened with 19th century technologies. Our modern network, with its billions of sensitive transistors and thousands of miles of transmission lines, is many times more vulnerable. We were lucky in 2012 when a massive solar storm passed by Earth in just 9 days. 9 days. If it had hit us, we would still be recovering. The third option is localized non-constructive electromagnetic pulse devices, sometimes called E-bombs. These specialized traditional munitions or non-constructive directed energy devices can have effects ranging from highly localized to regional. The military forces are already using them to disable the enemy's electronics. Although they could not incapacitate the entire country at once, they could create devastating regional outages that would lead to broader failures. The terrorist group that attacked several strategically important substations with these devices could paralyze entire regions. This is what makes all three of these threats absolutely terrifying. Speed. We are not talking about a hurricane from which one can evacuate, nor about a pandemic with an incubation period. The consequences will unfold in a cascading manner, initially affecting one or more critical infrastructures, and then spreading to additional sectors or geographical regions. For a few nanoseconds, the transformers fail. For seconds, the control centers plunge into darkness. For minutes, everything built on these systems collapses in sequence. You are at the center of the disaster, not even realizing what has happened. Let me describe what the first 30 minutes at the scene really look like. Understanding this timeline is critically important for your survival plan. Electricity disappears for no apparent reason, without a storm or explosions, just sudden darkness. Most cars made after the mid-90s immediately stop as their engine control units and ignition circuits overload. Imagine that every highway in America turns into a parking lot in a matter of seconds. Cell towers fail as their backup batteries drain, struggling against induced currents. The air traffic control radar screens go dark. The ventilation systems in hospitals stop. Millions of homes face what I call the simultaneous death of appliances. Everything, from your smart refrigerator to heating systems, just stops working. But what no one talks about is the psychological impact of the all-encompassing silence. Take the quietest moment you have ever experienced and multiply it by an entire city. No humming of air conditioners, no distant noise of traffic, no music coming from buildings, just a terrifying silence that instantly induces panic in the unprepared. Extreme electromagnetic incidents can damage a significant part of the country's critical infrastructure, including the electrical grid, communication means, water supply, and sewage systems, as well as vehicles. In these first 30 minutes, those with old cars that still work are lucky, those who are near home and not stuck in elevators or subways, and those who immediately understand what is happening instead of waiting for emergency alerts that will never come. As the transition from the first hour to the first full day occurs, cascading failures accelerate at a pace that most people cannot imagine. Without the electrical grid, water supply companies stop the flow of water as soon as their diesel generators run out of fuel. This means no water pressure in the taps. Sewage waters begin to flow back into low-lying drains, creating immediate health threats. Oil refineries cannot pump crude oil through broken pumps, and the entire delivery system, based on the just-in-time principle, halts at every stage where a microchip controls a valve, conveyor, gate, or even something as simple as a barcode scanner. Let's be honest about our food supply. Stores operate with minimal stock, and on average, the city holds about 3 days' worth of food under ideal conditions. These are not ideal conditions. The communication of law enforcement also fails, along with emergency call networks. Police patrols with outdated analog ignition systems may still operate, but their digital radios no longer function, forcing officers to coordinate actions by shouting or using personal mobile phones, which also do not work. The presence in uniform, which usually calms the nervous public, diminishes with each passing hour. Hospitals turn from places of healing into traps of death. Modern ventilation devices, infusion pumps, and automated medicine cabinets are breaking down. The elevators get stuck between floors, and even when the backup generators manage to start, they are only designed for short outages and will exhaust the diesel supplies in 2 to 3 days. The expected fuel deliveries never arrived. For those in need of urgent medical assistance, the countdown to crisis has already begun. In 2016, I visited a regional hospital to write an article about preparedness, and the emergency manager told me something frightening. Their backup power was designed to keep critical systems running for a maximum of 72 hours. After that, they had no plan. They hoped for the return of electricity or fuel supplies that would never arrive through the blocked streets. This conversation changed my approach to preparing for my family's medical needs. On the second day, the reality begins to be realized by the city's residents. The tap water has completely stopped. Toilets no longer flush. Food storage is impossible. Pumps at gas stations do not work. Even those who prudently kept cash find it almost useless, as payment systems require electricity. What begins as a shopping panic quickly turns into mass looting, first for essential items like bottled water and canned goods, and then for everything that can be used in exchange. The supplies that the government was supposed to provide to the local population are extremely limited and scattered across the territory. Even FEMA documents acknowledge that their supply chains for mass feeding require functioning highways and reliable communication, which are absent. As rumors spread faster than facts, civil order begins to deteriorate sharply. During this time, spontaneous militias start to appear, patrolling residential neighborhoods or rural intersections. Loss of communication creates information voids where no one knows what is happening even a few miles away. Is the government responding? Has electricity been restored in the neighboring district? Is help coming? Without answers, fear grows, and people make decisions based on the worst assumptions. By the end of the first week, the social structure uniting communities begins to unravel as trust disappears, and survival instincts kick in. Now, before delving into long-term survival strategies, I want to share something that may significantly change your path to preparedness. I understand how overwhelming it can all seem, especially when you are just starting out or trying to prepare everything with a limited budget. I gathered a completely free resource that I sincerely wished I had when I started preparing for various situations in 2012. This guide is called the $50 Food Supply Plan, detailing how to turn just $50 into a food supply for 90 days for your family. No expensive frozen meals, no complicated systems, just a simple and proven plan that really works. This guide contains an exact shopping list with specific brands and prices, 37 essential items that most people never think to stock up on, as well as emergency meals that can be prepared without fuel or electricity. There's even a section about snacks from gas stations that become incredibly valuable for trade when the system fails. The link to this resource is in the description below and pinned in the comments. It is completely free. I am not selling anything. I just want you to have this resource because it complements everything we are talking about today. Download it, print it, and start creating food security for your family. Believe me, even a basic supply will allow you to outpace 99% of the population in case something like an electromagnetic pulse happens. So, let's get back to the topic. As we move into the second and third weeks after the electromagnetic pulse, we witness what can be described as the death of modernity. Without refrigeration equipment, 100% of perishable products spoil, leading not only to hunger, but also to a large-scale public health crisis. Millions of tons of rotting products attract pests and spread diseases. Animals on industrial farms die from heat, dehydration, or hunger when automated feeding and cooling systems fail. All those grains stored in silos cannot be processed without electric motors. Chlorine plants sitting idle mean that any city water still available becomes a cocktail of pathogens. Oil refining comes to a complete halt, and the fuel in underground reservoirs becomes a finite and depleting resource. As soon as the generators and agricultural machinery exhaust their supplies, almost all the mechanized survival tools we rely on will simply disappear. Medical supply chains are completely collapsing. Insulin supplies are spoiling without refrigeration. Antibiotics are losing their effectiveness. The provision of first aid returns to the conditions of field surgery during the Civil War. This is the sad truth confirmed by government studies. Hunger. The impact of the environment, diseases, and violence will cause a large part of the urban population to disappear during this 3-month period. This is not a supposition. These are scenarios outlined in several briefings by the Commission on Electromagnetic Pulses at the highest levels of government. The hard reality is that a society built solely on just-in-time delivery systems and computer infrastructure simply cannot function when these systems disappear overnight. By the 3rd month, we no longer speak of inconveniences or traditional disasters. We speak of the collapse of the entire system that supports modern human life in densely populated centers. Most vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure can be mitigated, but recovery time can stretch for months or even years, depending on the extent of the damage. So how do you survive in such a situation? When electricity, food, and law enforcement disappear at the same time, survival comes down to what I call the rule of reality. You need to focus solely on the primary needs that sustain human life. Let me tell you about the 5 essential needs that must be met. And I emphasize, it is necessary, not desirable. The first and most important thing is water. Water is extremely important for survival, and dehydration can occur very quickly in emergency situations. You need to have access to at least 1 gallon of water per person per day, as well as additional purification methods. I am talking about gravitational filters, chemical treatment using calcium hypochlorite, and the possibility of boiling water if necessary. After the electromagnetic pulse, the city water becomes unreliable as soon as the pressure in the system drops and pollutants enter the pipelines. Let me tell you about my mistake that I made at the beginning of my preparation journey. I had stored water, but only one way to purify additional water: a ceramic filter. And that's it. One single point of failure. Then the filter cracked during the hike, and I realized how difficult I would be in a real emergency. Now I use several purification methods, including cleaning tablets, a gravity-fed system, and ordinary chlorine. Reserving saves lives. The second is safety. Opportunistic violence increases in proportion to population density. Complex protection starts with reinforced doors, grills or boards on windows, blackout curtains to prevent light signals at night, and round-the-clock vigilance for your family or group. Communication without radio transmission, such as whistles or visual codes, becomes necessary when electronics fail. The third is shelter and warmth. Your dependence on thermostats and electric heaters ends the moment the power goes out. Wood stoves, kerosene heaters, and reliable thermal window coverings become true saviors, especially in northern regions where winter temperatures can kill faster than hunger. If you live in a place with cold winters and you have no source of heat that works without electricity, you need to solve this problem as soon as possible. The fourth is food. Focus on long-lasting food products: grains, beans, freeze-dried meals, lard, honey. These products actually become a form of currency during power outages. Gardening requires non-inheritable seeds that produce seeds and hand tools that do not require electricity. Any livestock you keep will require careful feed planning, as you can no longer just run to the feed store. The fifth is medicine. Pharmacies are closing, and prescriptions cannot be renewed. You need to have at least a 6-month supply of any critically important medications required by your family members. Keep broad-spectrum antibiotics if you can legally obtain them. Have enough materials for wound care sufficient for serious injuries. Even basic things like caffeine and electrolyte packets help maintain both physical and psychological resilience. These are not just recommendations or good ideas. These are the minimum requirements for survival when all the systems we rely on vanish overnight. The laws of reality do not care about your retirement plans or how likely this scenario is. They are only interested in whether you have prepared for these 5 basic needs before they become impossible to satisfy. One of the most discussed questions in preparation for an electromagnetic pulse is whether to stay in one's home or move to a backup location. After the EMP, this decision becomes significantly more complicated, as the roads are almost blocked by immobile vehicles that hinder movement in all lanes. Attempting to leave on foot exposes families to the despair of others, and the risk of attack from those who quickly realize that travelers likely have supplies. Most experienced preparers choose to stay put if they do not have a fully equipped shelter that can be reached off-road or via alternative routes. A secure house with access to water, a supply of fuel, and allies in the community offers the highest chances of survival for most people. A familiar environment also provides psychological comfort in extremely stressful times. Moreover, You will have all your supplies already in place, not just what you could carry. If you absolutely need to move after an EMP, you must plan several alternative routes, stockpiles along these routes, and navigation methods without using electronics. This is not something that can be improvised when every road is clogged with dead cars and desperate people. The golden rule here is harsh but true. If you have not prepared your backup location and practiced the route there under adverse conditions, staying put is almost always the best survival decision in an EMP scenario. I learned this lesson from my own experience during the regional power outage in 2018. I thought I had a great evacuation plan to my friend's cabin, which is 3 hours away. When I really tried to implement it during the blackout, I encountered roadblocks, detours, and traffic jams that I hadn't anticipated. What was supposed to take 3 hours took 9, and I used much more fuel than planned. If this were a real EMP situation with cars everywhere, I would never have made it. Now my main plan is to stay put with supplies right here. Let's talk about preparedness specifically tailored to the EMP situation, which differs from general disaster readiness. The first critically important preparation is to protect your essential electronic devices from electromagnetic pulses. You can create a simple protective structure by wrapping critical devices in 2 layers of heavy aluminum foil separated by cardboard, and then placing them in a steel trash can with a tightly closing lid. Numerous tests have confirmed that such protective barriers significantly reduce field strength and can protect sensitive electronics from most EMP scenarios. What exactly should be protected? Radio stations or portable GMRS devices, a backup solar charger, flash drives filled with survival reference materials, a spare laptop, or maybe even a tablet with essential guides. All of these will be your information support when other sources of information disappear. Keep in mind that any device you use at the moment of an electromagnetic pulse strike will not be protected. Therefore, it is important to keep backup equipment. The next step is to replace electric tools with mechanical counterparts. Replace electric saws with hand saws, cordless drills with hand drills, and kitchen processors with manual grain mills. These tools are not just backups. In a world after an electromagnetic pulse strike, they will be your only helpers. Small solar panels connected to LED lighting and low-power radio chargers will be significantly more efficient than gasoline generators, which will become useless when fuel supplies run out. Focus on 12-volt DC systems that can operate directly from batteries without inverters. As for transportation, old diesel cars with minimal electronics, especially models from before the 90s, have the best chance of survival. Keep spare starters, generators, and glow plug relays in a metal casing. If you have the necessary technical skills, consider retrofitting at least one car with mechanical spark distribution. I have a 1939 Chevrolet that is completely mechanical. No computer chips, no complex electronic systems. It is not the most beautiful or the most efficient by modern standards, but it will work after an electromagnetic pulse when other cars become just heavy objects. Communication becomes critically important for understanding the situation. Keep handheld radios in the amateur or GMRS range, as well as reference guides in your farm screen. A small folding antenna and spare batteries will ensure coordination over short distances nearby when other means of communication fail. Even if you are not a licensed operator now, having secure equipment will allow you to learn how to use it after the event, when FCC compliance becomes the least of your worries. These electromagnetic pulse preparations create a unique level of resilience that standard disaster training does not account for. They acknowledge the particular vulnerability of electronic systems and propose alternatives that do not rely on the power grid or complex supply chains. Each such decision is aimed at eliminating a specific weakness that can be exploited by an electromagnetic pulse, creating islands of capability in a sea of technological desolation. The harsh reality of the world after an electromagnetic pulse strike is that desperate people will target those who have supplies. Therefore, the protection and formation of communities become not additional options, but essential requirements for survival. You need to strengthen your borders with physical barriers such as thorny hedges, mechanical motion alarms, overlapping observation zones, and hidden fallback positions in case your main defense is breached. One family, no matter how well armed, is easy prey for determined groups. But a disciplined coalition controlling key points in the area becomes a serious deterrent for raiders. Joint duties allow people to rest fully. Community labor support significantly speeds up the completion of essential projects such as gardening, woodcutting, and sanitation work. Joint purchases allow you to acquire more necessary items for less money before disaster strikes. Building a community must happen long before a crisis. Start getting to know your neighbors now. Identify those who have useful skills, such as medical training, mechanical abilities, or experience in security, and begin to build trust. In a crisis situation, you do not rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training, and this applies not only to physical, but also to social preparation. This is what I realized after many years of preparation. The fantasy of surviving alone is just a fantasy. I used to think I could handle everything by myself. However, while participating in a power outage simulation on the weekend with other trained individuals, I was horrified to realize how quickly fatigue sets in when trying to maintain safety, process food, manage water, and handle all other survival tasks. The presence of a reliable team significantly increases your capabilities. Communities that will survive in the long term after a power outage will be those who quickly establish fair rules, share responsibilities, and create mutual protection agreements while maintaining enough flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. Start building these relationships now. Organize a barbecue for the neighbors. Create a community garden. Establish a local disaster preparedness group. The social infrastructure you build today will become your survival network tomorrow. If you survive the first 3 months after the power outage, your focus should shift from immediate life support to sustainable existence in the long term. Create high-yield gardens using heirloom seeds, focusing on calorie-rich staples like potatoes and winter squash that provide the most nutrients for your efforts. Turn each southern wall into a passive solar dehydrator to preserve crops without electricity. Build brick stoves and chimneys that reduce fuel consumption by 80% compared to traditional wood stoves. These ingenious devices capture heat that usually escapes through the chimney and slowly radiate it into the living space. I built one of them in my workshop a few years ago, and the efficiency is simply amazing. I use only a quarter of the firewood compared to what I burned before. Sanitation becomes a matter of life and death in the absence of municipal systems. Dig 2-stage compost toilets at least 60 meters away from any water